A big city lawyer was representing the railroad in a lawsuit filed by an old rancher. The rancher's prize bull was missing from the section through which the railroad passed. The rancher only wanted to be paid the fair value of the bull. The case was scheduled to be tried before the justice of the peace in the back room of the general store. The lawyer for the railroad immediately cornered the rancher and tried to get him to settle out of court. The lawyer did his best selling job, and finally the rancher agreed to take half of what he was asking. After the rancher had signed the release and taken the check, the young lawyer couldn't resist gloating a little over his success, telling the rancher, "You know, I hate to tell you this, old man, but I put one over on you in there. I couldn't have won the case. The engineer was asleep and the fireman was in the caboose when the train went through your ranch that morning. I didn't have one witness to put on the stand. I duped you." The old rancher replied, "Well, I'll tell you, young feller, I was a little worried about winning that case myself because that bull came home this morning." A man spent a weekend gambling in Las Vegas casinos, and he won $100,000. He didn't want anyone to know about it, so when he came back home, he immediately went out to the backyard of his house, dug a hole, and planted the money in it. The next morning, he walked outside and found only an empty hole. He noticed footsteps leading from the hole to the house next door, which was owned by a deaf mute. On the same street lived a professor who understood sign language and was a friend of the deaf man. Grabbing his pistol, the enraged man went to awaken the professor and dragged him to the deaf man's house. He screamed at the professor, "You tell this guy that if he doesn't give me back my money, I'll kill him." The professor conveyed the message to his friend, and his friend replied in sign language, "I hid it in my backyard, underneath the cherry tree." The professor turned to the man with the gun and said, "He's not going to tell you. He said he'd rather die first." A little girl asked her mom, "Mom, may I take the dog for a walk around the block?" Mom replies, "No, because she is in heat." "What's that mean?" asked the child. "Go ask your father," answered the mother. "I think he's in the garage." The little girl goes to the garage and says, "Dad, may I take Belle for a walk around the block? I asked Mom, but she said the dog was in heat and to come to you." Dad said, "Bring Belle over here." He took a rag, soaked it with petrol, and scrubbed the dog's backside with it and said, "Okay, you can go now, but keep Belle on the leash and only go one time around the block." The little girl left and returned a few minutes later with no dog on the leash. Surprised, Dad asked, "Where's Belle?" The little girl said, "She ran out of petrol about halfway down the street. But don't worry, another dog is pushing her home." A man who had spent his whole life in the desert is on his way to meet a friend who lives in the city. He has never seen a train or the tracks they run on. While standing in the middle of the railroad tracks, he heard a whistle but didn't know what it was. Predictably, he's hit and is thrown to the side of the tracks and sustains some minor internal injuries, a few broken bones, and some bruises. After weeks in the hospital recovering, he's finally at his friend's house attending a party. While in the kitchen, he suddenly hears the kettle whistling. He grabs a baseball bat from the nearby closet and proceeds to batter and bash the kettle into an unrecognizable lump of metal. His friend, hearing the ruckus, rushes into the kitchen, sees what's happened, and asks the man, "What the hell you doing to the kettle?" The man replies, "Man, you have to kill these things when they're little." A guy sticks his head into a barber shop and asks, "Hey mate, how long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looks around the shop and says, "About 2 hours," and the guy leaves. A few days later, the same guy sticks his head in the door and asks, "How long before I can get a haircut?" Again, the barber looks around at the shop full of customers and says, "About 2 hours." The guy leaves. A week later, the same guy sticks his head in the shop and asks, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looks around the shop and says, "About an hour and a half." The guy leaves. The barber looks over at a friend in the shop and says, "Hey, Joey, I'll give you a free cut if you follow that guy and see where he goes." In a little while, Joey comes back into the shop laughing hysterically. The barber says, "This must be good. Where did he go when he left here?" Joey says, "To your house." A truck driver frequently traveled through a small town where there was a courthouse at the side of the road. Of course, there were always lawyers walking along the road. The truck driver made it a practice to hit any pedestrian lawyers with his truck as he sped by. One day, he spotted a priest walking along the road and stopped to give him a ride. A little further along, as he approached the town, he spotted a lawyer walking along the side of the road. Automatically, he veered his truck towards the lawyer. But then he remembered his passenger. He swerved back to the center of the road, but he heard a huge thud, and in the rearview mirror, he spotted the lawyer rolling across the field. He turned to the priest and said, "Father, I'm sure that I missed that lawyer." And the priest replied, "That's okay, my son. I got him with the door." A man returns from the doctor and tells his wife that the doctor has told him he has only 24 hours to live. Given this prognosis, the man asks his wife for sex. Naturally, she agrees, and they make love. About 6 hours later, the husband goes to his wife and says, "Honey, you know I now have only 18 hours to live. Could we please do it one more time?" Of course, the wife agrees, and they do it again. Later, as the man gets into bed, he looks at his watch and realizes that he now has only 8 hours left. He touches his wife's shoulder and asks, "Honey, please, just one more time before I die." She says, "Of course, dear," and they make love for the third time. After this session, the wife rolls over and falls asleep. The man, however, worried about his impending death, tosses and turns until he's down to 4 more hours. He taps his wife, who rouses. "Honey, I have only 4 more hours. Do you think we could—" At this point, the wife sits up and says, "Listen, I have to get up in the morning. You don't." Jimmy came from the pub Friday night steaming drunk, so he took his clobber off, chucked it on the floor, and climbed quietly into bed next to his wife, pecking her on the cheek, and then fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, he was greeted by a man with long silver hair and a white robe. "Who the hell are you?" Jimmy asked. "I am St. Peter, and I have to tell you that you have died in your sleep, but redemption is at hand, and you can be returned to earth as a dog or a hen." After a short period of thought, Jimmy decided that a hen was best. With plenty of fresh air and open fields, he could simply strut around and eat what he wants. A few hours after being returned and strutting around, he meets the rooster, says hello, and the rooster replies, "Hello, you're new and nice to see you." Jimmy, now a hen, says, "Can I ask you a question? I've got this strange feeling inside like I am going to explode." The rooster tells him, "You're ovulating. Have you never laid an egg before?" "Never," Jimmy replies. "Just relax and let it happen. You'll be fine," the rooster replies. Jimmy duly lays the first egg, and he is overcome with joy at being a mother. The second comes, and he is full of the joys of spring. As he can feel the third one coming, he feels an enormous smack on his head, followed by a voice saying, "Jimmy, you drunken, wake up! You are crapping all over the bed!" A Ked Scotsman was walking down a country path after finishing off a large amount of whiskey at a local pub. He felt quite sleepy and decided to nap against a tree. As he slept, 2 female tourists heard his loud snoring. When they found him, one said, "I've always wondered what a Scotsman wears under his kilt." She boldly walked over to the sleeper, raised his kilt, and saw that he wore nothing at all. Her friend said, "Well, the mystery is solved. Let's thank him for sharing." She took off her pretty blue hair ribbon and gently tied it around the Scotsman's private parts. A while later, the Scotsman was awakened by the call of nature. He raised his kilt and was bewildered at the sight of the neatly tied blue ribbon. He stared for a minute, then said, "I don't know where you've been, laddie, but it's nice to see you won first prize." A photographer, who was also a confirmed atheist, decided to go into the woods to get photos of the fall foliage. It was a beautiful day. Fall colors, birds chirping, a babbling brook, and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. While snapping shots, the atheist heard a noise behind him and whirled around to see a huge bear coming through the bushes. He dropped his camera and ran, and kept running. And looking behind him, he noticed the bear was gaining on him. He was so scared that tears came to his eyes. He ran faster, but the bear was closing in on him. He ran faster yet and tripped over a root. Rolling over onto his back, the atheist saw the bear rise to his full height and raise a huge paw, and the atheist cried out, "Oh God, no!" And everything stopped. The birds stopped chirping, the brook stopped babbling, the gentle breeze stopped, and the bear froze with his paw in the air. And the atheist heard a booming voice say, "Young man, for years you doubted my very existence, but now that your life is in peril, you call my name to help you. Why should I do so?" And the atheist thought for a moment and said, "Yes, you are right. If you are God, then it would be hypocritical of me to become a Christian at this point in my life, but do you think that you could at least make the bear a Christian for today?" And the booming voice was quiet for a moment and then said, "Done." And everything started again. The birds chirping, brook babbling, and gentle breeze rustling the leaves, and the bear slowly lowered his paw. And the bear put his paws together and bowed his massive head and said, "For what I am about to eat, may the Lord make me truly thankful." A sales rep, an administration clerk, and their manager are walking to lunch when they find an antique oil lamp. They rub it, and a genie comes out in a puff of smoke. The genie says, "I usually only grant 3 wishes, so I'll give each of you just one." Me first, says the admin clerk. "I want to be in the Bahamas, driving a speedboat without a care in the world." Poof, she's gone, in astonishment. Me next, says the sales rep. "I want to be in Hawaii, relaxing on the beach with my personal masseuse and the love of my life." Poof, he's gone. "Okay, you're up," the genie says to the manager. The manager says, "I want those 2 back in the office after lunch." A newlywed couple wishes to worship at the local church in the village they have moved to. The vicar greets them and informs them that it is a lovely church with a wonderful congregation, but they have a strict rule. "In our church, we believe that to show true faith, you must demonstrate that you live by those lessons that God taught in the Bible, including abstinence from carnal desire. Do you think you can attain that?" "I am so sorry, Reverend, I don't believe we can. My wife was reaching up for a tin of peas and she dropped them on the floor. When she bent over to pick them up, lust took over, and we partook in the pleasures of the flesh." The vicar retorts, "I am sorry to tell you that you will not be welcome in our church." "That's fine, vicar," the man replies. "We are banned from the local supermarket as well." A farmer goes to a livestock dealer and buys an anvil, a bucket, 2 chickens, and a goose. The farmer looks at his purchases and says, "Oh no, I walked here. How am I going to carry all this home?" The livestock dealer said, "Why don't you put the anvil in the bucket? Carry the bucket in one hand, put a chicken under each arm, and carry the goose in your other hand." "Hey, thanks," the farmer said, and off he went. While walking home, he met a little old lady who told him she was lost. She asked, "Can you tell me how to get to 1515 Mockingbird Lane?" The farmer said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I live just down the road from there. Let's take my shortcut and go down this alley. We'll be there in no time." The little old lady said, "I am a lonely widow without a husband to defend me." How do I know that when we get in the alley you won't hold me up against the wall and ravish me?" The farmer said, "You're joking, lady. I am carrying a bucket, an anvil, 2 chickens, and a goose. How in the world could I possibly hold you up against the wall and do that?" She replied, "Set the goose down, cover him with the bucket, put the anvil on top of the bucket, and I'll hold the chickens." A lawyer runs a stop sign at a junction and gets pulled over by a traffic cop. He thinks that he is smarter than the cop because he is sure that he has a better education. He decides to prove this to himself and have some fun at the policeman's expense. Traffic cop says, "License and registration, please." Lawyer says, "What for?" Traffic cop says, "You didn't come to a complete stop at the stop sign at the junction." Lawyer says, "I slowed down and no one was coming." Traffic cop says, "You still didn't come to a complete stop. License and registration, please." Lawyer says, "What's the difference?" Traffic cop says, "The difference is you have to come to a complete stop. That's the law. License and registration, please." Lawyer says, "If you can show me the legal difference between slow down and stop, I'll give you my license and registration and you give me the ticket. If not, you let me go and no ticket." Traffic cop says, "Exit your vehicle, sir." At this point, the traffic cop takes out his pepper spray, squirts the lawyer, and then starts beating the crap out of him with his truncheon and says, "Do you want me to stop or just slow down?" On a hot afternoon, Scrooge the miser and his grandson, Tim, were walking home from a party. Tim complains, "Gramps, it's still a long way back to our house. It's hot and I'm tired. Look, there's a bus stop here. Can we please take the bus home?" Scrooge is aghast. "It'll cost us $6 to get home from here. What a waste of money. We'll walk it." Tim sighs, but he's a good kid and doesn't fuss about it. They barely walk a few feet when Scrooge sees a passing taxi and hails it. "How much would you charge to take us home to Springfield Avenue?" Scrooge asks the cab driver. "Springfield Avenue? Around $20, says the driver. "Oof, that's too much. We won't be requiring your services, thank you." The cab drives off. Tim turns to his grandfather, exasperated. "Did you really think that a taxi to Springfield Avenue would cost less than a bus ride?" he asks, incredulously. "Don't be ridiculous, of course not," Scrooge scoffs. "Then why did you bother flagging down the taxi, Gramps?" "Foolish boy. We would have saved $6 by not taking the bus, now we're saving $20 by not taking the taxi." A guy walks into a bar with his dog and says, "I'll have a scotch and water, and my dog would like a whiskey sour." The bartender says, "Sorry, we don't allow animals in here." The dog replies, "Hey, I'm tired of being discriminated against. Just give me a drink." The bartender says, "Oh no, not another ventriloquist with the old talking dog trick, both of you, get out of here." No, this isn't a trick, I promise you," says the man. "I tell you what, I'll go for a walk around the block, and you talk to Gizmo here." The man leaves, and the bartender sees him turn the corner. "Now, can I have my drink?" asks the dog. The bartender is amazed. "Sure you can, and it's on the house. Listen, can you do me a favor? My wife works next door at the cafe. It'll make her day if you go in and order a cup of coffee. Here's $10, and you can keep the change afterwards." "Okay," says the dog, and he takes the $10 and leaves. 10 minutes go by, and the dog doesn't come back. The owner returns and asks where is the dog, so both of them go off to see what happened to the dog. As they approach the cafe, they see Gizmo going at it hot and heavy with a French poodle in the alley between the bar and cafe. The owner shouts, "Gizmo, what are you doing? You've never done this before." The dog shrugged. "Well, I've never had any money before." At a winery, the regular taster died, and the director started looking for a new one to hire. A drunkard with a ragged, dirty look came in to apply for the position. The director of the winery wondered how to send him away. He gave him a glass to drink. The drunk tried it and said, "It's a muscat, 3 years old, grown on a north slope, matured in steel containers. Low grade, but acceptable." That's correct," said the boss, astonished. Another glass. "This is a Cabernet, 8 years old, a southwestern slope, oak barrels, matured at 8 degrees. Requires 3 more years for the finest results." "Correct." A third glass. "It's a Pinot Blanc champagne, high grade and exclusive," the drunk said calmly. The director was blown away, but in case this was some sort of hoax, he wanted to put the man to a real test. He winked at his secretary, secretly suggesting something. She left the room and came back in with a glass of urine. The alcoholic tried it. "It's a blonde, 26 years old, 3 months pregnant, and if I don't get the job, I'll name the father." A fellow walks into a bar, notices a very large jar on the counter, and sees that it's filled to the brim with $10 bills. He guesses there must be more than $10,000 in it. He approaches the bartender and asks, "What's with the money in the jar?" "Well, you pay $10, and if you pass 3 tests, you get all the money and the keys to a brand new Lexus." The man certainly isn't going to pass this up, and so he asks, "What are the 3 tests?" "You must pay first. Those are the rules," says the bartender. So, after thinking it over a while, the man gives the bartender the $10 and the bartender drops it into the jar. "Okay," the bartender says, "here's what you need to do. First, you have to drink a whole quart of tequila in a minute or less, and you can't make a face while doing it. Second, there's a pit bull chained in the back with a bad tooth. You have to remove that tooth with your bare hands. Third, there's a 90-year-old lady upstairs who has never had sex. You have to take care of that problem." The man is stunned. "I know I paid my $10, but I'm not an idiot. I won't do it. You'd have to be nuts to drink a quart of tequila and then do all those other things." "Your call," says the bartender. But your money stays where it is. As time goes on, and the man has a few more drinks, he finally says, "Where's the darn tequila?" He grabs the bottle with both hands and drinks it as fast as he can. Tears stream down both cheeks, but he doesn't make a face, and he did it in 58 seconds. Next, he staggers out the back door, where he sees the pit bull chained to a pole. Soon the people inside the bar hear growling, biting, and screaming sounds. Then nothing but silence. Just when they think that the man surely must be dead, he staggers back into the bar, with his shirt ripped open, and there are scratches and blood all over his body. He says, "Now, where's that old woman with the bad tooth?" The moral of the story? Listen carefully to the directions and don't trust your judgment when alcohol is involved. A man wakes up one morning with a huge erection that just won't go away. After a couple of days, he is really concerned, so he puts on the baggiest pair of trousers he can find and heads for the drugstore. He enters the store and goes to the pharmaceutical section. The lady there asks if she might help him. He asks to see a male pharmacist. The woman tells him that there is no male pharmacist. The man starts to leave. The woman says, "Wait a minute, sir. I am a registered pharmacist, as is my sister, and we own the store. We are very professional and discreet and accustomed to personal problems of all kinds." The guy is desperate. He edges up to the counter, unzips his trousers, and gets out his rather stiff member. He then says, "What can you give me for this?" The woman says, "How long has it been that way?" The man responds, "Almost 3 days." The woman says, "I will have to consult with my sister, and I'll be right back." She leaves and returns in a few minutes. The man asks, "What did you decide?" She says, "The best we can do right now is $5,500 interest in the drugstore." A young doctor moved out to a small community to replace an older doctor who was retiring. The older doctor suggested that the young one accompany him on his house call rounds so the community could become used to a new doctor. At the first house, a woman complained, "I've been a little sick to my stomach." The older doctor said, "Well, you've probably been overdoing the fresh fruit. Cut back on the amount you've been eating and see if that does the trick." As they left, the younger doctor remarked, "You didn't even examine that woman," and then asked, "How did you come to the diagnosis so quickly?" "Ah, you noticed I dropped my stethoscope on the floor in there. When I bent over to pick it up, I noticed a half-dozen banana peels in the trash. That was what has probably been making her sick." The younger doctor replied, "Pretty clever. If you don't mind, I think I'll try that at the next house." Arriving at the next house, both physicians spent several minutes talking with a younger woman. She said that she just didn't have the energy she once did and said, "I'm feeling terribly run down lately." "You've probably been doing too much for the church," the younger doctor told her. "Perhaps you should cut back a bit and see if that helps." As they left, the elder doctor said, "I know that woman well. Your diagnosis is almost certainly correct, as she is very active in the church." Then he asked, "But how did you arrive at it?" "I did what you did at the last house. I dropped my stethoscope, and when I bent down to retrieve it, I noticed the pastor under the bed." Little Stevie is talking to his best friend at junior school about his parents. His best friend says, "If they are like my parents, they will be hiding some secret from you, and I found if I said I know the whole truth, they got anxious and gave me money and presents." Little Stevie decides to try that when he gets home. After arriving home from school, he sees his mom and says, "I know the whole truth." His mam goes red, grabs her purse, and gives him 10 towels. Later, his dad arrives home from work, and little Stevie again says, "I know the whole truth." His dad is flustered, reaches into his wallet and gives him $20. Little Stevie thinks this is great, but wonders if it works with everyone. Anyway, having left the house for school, he sees the postman as again says, "I know the whole truth," at which the postman drops his mail bag and shouts, "Come here, son, give Daddy a hug." A man is strolling past a psychiatric hospital and suddenly remembers an important meeting. Unfortunately, his watch has stopped and he cannot tell if he is late or not. Then he notices a patient similarly strolling about within the hospital fence. Calling out to the patient, the man says, "Pardon me, sir, but do you have the time?" The patient calls back, "1 moment," and throws himself upon the ground, pulling out a short stick as he does. He pushes the stick into the ground and, pulling out a carpenter's level, assures himself that the stick is vertical. With a compass, the patient locates north and with a steel ruler, measures the precise length of the shadow cast by the stick. Withdrawing a slide rule from his pocket, the patient calculates rapidly, then swiftly packs up all his tools and turns back to the pedestrian, saying, "It is now precisely 3:29 p.m., provided today is August 16th, which I believe it is." The man can't help but be impressed by this demonstration and sets his watch accordingly. Before he leaves, he says to the patient, "That was really quite remarkable. But tell me, what do you do on a cloudy day or at night when the stick casts no shadow?" The patient holds up his wrist and says, "I suppose I just look at my watch." A very elderly couple is having an elegant dinner to celebrate their 75th wedding anniversary. The old man leans forward and says softly to his wife, "Dear, there is something that I must ask you. It has always bothered me that our 10th child never quite looked like the rest of our children. Now, I want to assure you that these 75 years have been the most wonderful experience I could have ever hoped for. And your answer cannot take all that away. But I must know, did he have a different father?" The wife drops her head, unable to look her husband in the eye. She paused for a moment and then confessed, Yes, he did. The old man is very shaken by the reality of what his wife was admitting hit him harder than he had expected. With a tear in his eye, he asks, Who? Who was he? Who was the father? Again, the old woman drops her head, saying nothing at first, as she tries to muster the courage to tell the truth to her husband. Then, finally, she says, You